Hi. The passage I would like to discuss this evening is 1 Timothy chapter 3, verse 15, where Paul says, "But if I am delayed, I write so that you may know how you ought to conduct yourself in the house of God, which is the church of the living God, the pillar and ground of the truth." Now there's a lot of points that I could draw out from this text, but there is one point in particular that I want to draw your attention to. And that is how Paul speaks of the church of the living God as the pillar and ground of the truth. Now the truth that Paul speaks about in this text, of course, is in reference to God's revelation to man, the Word of God. And of course one can say that the truth is mainly in regard to Jesus Christ, for it is He who the Word of God ultimately points to. And Paul declares that the church is the pillar and ground of this truth of Christ. Now, the words for pillar and ground, that referred to those great supports that were under the statues of the Greek gods, and the purpose of these supports was to provide stability and to hold up these statues so they would become more visible. And it's the metaphor of the pillar and ground that Paul uses to describe the church in regard to its relationship to the truth of Jesus Christ. Namely, that it is the church's responsibility and privilege to uphold the truth about Christ. Even as those columns and pillars in ancient times were used to hold up and to stabilize the statues they were under, so the church is to hold up and stabilize the truth of Christ. But how exactly does the church do this? Well, in order to answer this question, it's helpful, first of all, to define what Paul means by the church. Now, the word church literally refers to an assembly. The Greek term for church, as some of you might know, is the word Ekklesia. And this word was originally used to refer to a gathering of citizens that were called out from their homes into some public place. And when these citizens of a given locality met together, they would have an ekklesia, that they would discuss and debate things such as treaties and laws, and they would make decisions, and they would elect officials and so forth. And so likewise, when Paul uses the word ekklesia or church, he's referring to an assembly, namely an assembly of Christians. More specifically, he's referring to an identifiable group of Christians that would assemble together regularly in the name of Christ for the purposes of mutual exhortation, encouragement, sharing, the observance of the Lord's Supper, and so forth. So Paul is referring to an assembly of Christians. And again, as Paul says in the text, as he alludes to in the text, one of the responsibilities and privileges of the assembly is that it is to uphold the truth. But how exactly does the Christian assembly fulfill Paul's words in regard to upholding the truth? Is Paul's words fulfilled simply by the pastor or some gifted teachers upholding the truth each Sunday? Is that what Paul's referring to when he speaks about the church? Is he just referring to a very small percentage of the church doing the upholding? Well, I think many Christians, especially some pastors, seem to think that's what Paul is referring to. For example, a while ago I listened to part of a sermon on this passage by John MacArthur, and John MacArthur seemed to believe that his church fulfilled this text by means of the various classes that were held in the church building he meets in each week. But in addition, when it came time for the whole church to come together in one place, MacArthur seemed to imply that it was he himself that was to mainly uphold the truth. Here are his own words which he spoke to his congregation during the sermon regarding this passage, as he says, and quote, "You come on Sunday morning and I preach to you. You come back on Sunday night and you hear the Word of God again. Why? Because we are here to uphold the truth." Very simple definition of our existence. Notice he says we are here to uphold the truth, even though it's basically about 3% of the church upholding the truth. It seems that in John MacArthur's mind, Paul's instructions in regard to the assembly upholding the truth is fulfilled by him and a few other select teachers doing all the upholding when the whole church assembles. Now, is this what Paul is referring to when he speaks of the church being the pillar and ground of the truth? Is Paul mainly referring to just the talented orators and teachers in the church that are to uphold the truth? Well, I don't think so. For if it was mainly the gifted teachers and orators and speakers that were the true supports of the truth, I think Paul would have said so, but he doesn't. Instead, he speaks of the assembly, the Ekklesia, the church. They are to uphold the truth. Note that the elders and teachers, they are not the entire assembly. They are part of the assembly, but they are not the whole assembly. Again, the assembly refers to the entire body of believers. So it would stand to reason that Paul is referring to all believers in the church. They are to uphold the truth.